Hey, welcome back to the Road to the Great Canadian Open Winter 2026. This is my video series as I um, discuss and show how I paint up an army from start to finish, 1 hour a day, 1 hour at a time. As I've mentioned previously, I'm actually on vacation right now, so I'm not painting, but I wanted to keep the channel going, so I thought I'd produce other content. And right now, tier lists are kind of my jam. So I've discussed the base deck and commander cards in previous episodes. Today, I thought I'd talk about their unit options, and I'm going to break it up into different categories, so the 4-point units, 5-point units, 6-point units, etc. And I thought I'd start today with the 5-point units, only because the 4-point units, there's only two options, and I thought I'd lump that together at the end with the 8-point units, which also don't have a lot of choices too. Now, it's actually quite daunting to do this because there's actually a lot of choices. Even though the Brotherhood hilariously don't have any of their own 5-point units, they have access to Baratheons, Starks, and Neutrals. So it's almost like you are ranking or like rating four factions at the same time. The difference here being that if you're not aware, Brotherhood can take one Stark or Baratheon unit. So they're not only competing with each other in terms of points, but they're also competing with each other for the one spot allowed in the army list. So with that said, I thought I'd start off with a few units that have similar stats and similar roles, which would be the Stark Sworn Swords, Karstark Spearmen, I lied. Stark Sworn Swords, Karstark Loyalists, Highgarden Pikemen, and the Baratheon Sentinels. So all these units have a very similar stat line. They move 5, they have 7 attacks hitting on 4s. They usually degrade 754. I believe the Pikemen degrade 764. They have the same defensive stats, 4 plus armor, 6 plus morale, which are very good starting points. Before I go too deep into this, I want to preface this by saying that I don't think any of these options are actually very good choices for Brotherhood in general. And the reason for this is just the way that lists are built. So generally speaking, there's two ways, in my opinion, to build lists. You're going to have a 7 activation build that goes 4 combat units, 3 NCUs, or you might have an 8 activation build with 5 combat units and 3 NCUs. So, of course, some factions break those rules. If you play Free Folk, for example, you may have 9, 10, or even 11 activations. And in the past, some builds could work at 6 activations, but I find that most people today play 7 or 8. Whether you take 3 NCUs or 2 NCUs, that's also kind of flavor, but me personally, I like taking 3 NCUs. Now, for the Brotherhood in particular, your NCUs are going to generally cost 4 points. That's 12 points. You might take a 5-pointer like Tycho or Walder. Those tend to be, I think, more extreme fringe specific builds. So generally speaking, 12 points are allocated towards your NCUs. That leaves you 28 points. So if you're building a 4 combat unit build, that means your average unit is going to cost 7 points. Not 5 points, but 7 points. Now, you may want some cavalry, right? You may want to take Sworn Knights or Tully Cav, etc. That means one of your units will be an 8-pointer, which means another unit will be a 6-pointer. But again, there's no real space for a 5-pointer there. So for that reason, you're not going to see a lot of 5-pointers in the 4 combat unit 3 NCU build. If you go 8 activations, most factions don't have access to 4-point NCUs, generally speaking. So again, if you're spending 12 points in NCUs, it leaves you 28 points on units. That means, the way I think about it is you have 5 units that are with 5 points, and then you've got 3 flex points. And those flex points means you can take a few 6-point units, or you can take one 7-point unit and a 6-point unit, or you can take one 8-point unit and then 4 5-point units. However, Brotherhood have easy access to 4-point units through their peasant levy or whatever they're called, which means that every time you take a peasant unit, you can now take a 6-point unit instead. And I think that's just generally better. You'd rather take peasants, which are just activations to hold objectives and to, burn out your opponent's activations, and then have better activations to respond with. Instead of having a whole bunch of 5s, it's better to have a few 4s in the background and then have 6s and 7s and 8s lead the charge. So for that reason, I actually don't think I would take almost any of these 5-point units. Having said that, I should really experiment and practice and just see, maybe that's the way to go. With a few attachments, maybe these 5-point units can make the cut. So I don't know if I would put any of these units in the usually good or even strong choice option. I think they're all going to go situational or less. I also don't usually do five tiers. I think that things are good, bad, or maybes. But there's so many options that to create more gradation, I guess, I chose to go five. Having said that, again, for the 5 pointers in particular, I think I'll stick to situational or down. So, again, starting off with the units that are similar in stats and role, you've got the Stark Swords, Karstruck Loyalists, High Guard Pikemen, and the Sentinel Warden. So I'm going to put them all here for now, and we'll just kind of discuss the ins and outs of each unit and kind of arrange them as we have to. So again, similar stat lines. They're all just generally decent, sturdy bodies for 5 points. 4+ armor, 6+ morale is pretty good. Which ones do I prefer? Which ones do I think are worse? I think personally, I'm always a fan of the Starkstorm swords because they have critical blow built in. I think it's a good rule. It's spiky for sure. One could argue that maybe Karstruck Loyalists are a little more consistent with their vicious rule. Um, morale is interesting in this game. A lot of factions tend to have good morale 5, the stronger factions, or they have rules that help them with their morale. So vicious is not always reliable either. So to me, these are pretty equal. And again, I just have a soft spot for the Swords with their degrading profile that hits better as well. So I'm going to rank them ahead of the Karstruck Loyalists. And then I think I'm going to put High Guard Pikemen at the end. Their rules require them to charge, and there's no real tricks, as far as I know, in this faction that let you charge especially good. There's no swift repositions, etc., etc. So I'm going to put them at the back. And I think at the front, I might even put Baratheon Sentinels, because they do have a useful rule built in, which is Sentinel, as their name entails. Now, Sentinel, I think, is an underrated rule. I think once upon a time, players would say, well, you just play around it. You don't attack without some plan that the Baratheon unit's going to react to you and charge or maneuver. But I think if you overwhelm your opponent with Sentinel, it gets quite hard. I want to give props to Danaman, the Canadian national champion, for showing me this. He had a Greyjoy build that had 2 Sentinel units, and it becomes very tricky because it's like you attack anything and something else is going to maneuver and get you. So I think with Barrack having Sentinel built in, Baratheon Sentinels having Sentinel built in, and then you can take other units like Gold Company crossbows, you can create this real web of Sentinel where you can't attack anything in the Brotherhood army without something reacting back to you. And they have Sunring built in also, which the army kind of generally lacks since they don't have any cards that give them Sunring, so that's kind of good to have as well. So I'm going to put them at the front. They're the most dynamic unit, and I'm going to rank the rest here. And again, I'm going to keep that situational because I would generally not take any of these unless I was trying out some weird 5-point build. The next unit I'd like to discuss that are kind of similar in role are the Bolton Cutthroats and the Licensed Sellswords, which have a more aggressive stat line, essentially. So they have 7 attacks. I think the Sellswords also degrade 7/6/4. I'll look that up as I keep talking here. And they're a little more fragile. They have 5+ armor, and they have 7+ morale. Though, as pirates, oopsies, took the wrong one here, the Licensed Sellswords do have Pillage, essentially, which will give them +1 morale. So just double check here. The Licensed Sellswords, I believe they're 7/6/4. No, they're 7/5/4. They have a worse profile than Cutthroats. Okay, so that goes a long way. Cutthroats, I gotta tell you, I think I just generally like them a lot for what they are. Yes, they are squishier, and that's somewhat mitigated by the fact that they are in Brotherhood, which has more healing, but they just hit like a ton of bricks. 7 attacks hitting on 3s with Vicious, and then if you ever get to lead the round and attack before your enemy gets to activate, the ability to reroll all the time, reroll and then deal out a vulnerable token goes a really, really long way. So I wonder, like, they're going to go in the situational category as well for me. I think they're definitely better than the High Guard Pikemen. Because after the charge, they hit quite hard still. Are they better or worse than Starksworn swords? You know what? I'm going to say, in this context of Brotherhood, I think they might be better. I don't know if they're better than Sentinels, which are more dynamic, but the reason I'm going to put them higher than Starksworn Swords, which I'm a huge fan of, is because in this faction with Ghost of High Heart, and the extra healing, you kind of mitigate the downsides that the Cutthroats have. So I'm going to put them way at the front there. Licensed Sellswords, you know what? I've never actually seen them on the table. I've never used them before. I've read their stat line. I'm like, you know what? They're actually not that bad. Pillage, plus one morale, plus one attack, and then if you have two pillage tokens, um, seems to be good. Rolling highest dice, rolling 8 dice with critical blow. I love crit blow as a rule. That sounds quite good. I think I'm going to put them over the pikemen, which I just don't rate, unfortunately. The pikemen do heal. That does kind of sound good, but I think I'm looking for things that kill. You know, if you're looking for something that tanks, maybe the pikemen are better. I generally want to look for things that kill. Um, so the sellswords, I think I'm going to put ahead of the pikemen. Maybe they're about the same, honestly. The problem is there's really no other synergy. It's not like you're playing Greyjoys where there's tricks you can do with the pillage tokens. So, you know, more aggressive units. They move 5 still, so they're not going to get the charge. Pikemen really need the charge as well. But they're better in a grind. Or are they? The pikemen, I think, are 7-7. Double check that real quick. Which means that in a grind, on the second rank, they still hit with 7 dice. They are 7-6 for, so they hit a little bit worse. Versus 7-5 for hitting on 3s. It's actually very comparable. You know, because of the healing, I'm going to say that the pikemen are better. Because it just leans into the archetype a bit better with Brotherhood, I think. Next, we've got the Baratheon Wardens. Now, Baratheon Wardens are the exact opposite. I like to think of, you know, when the game first came out, you had Starksworn Swords, who were kind of in the middle. You had Cutthroats, who were the extreme attacking basic troop. And then on the other side, you had Lannister Guardsmen, who were the defensive troop. And Baratheon Wardens are very similar to that, in that they have 3+ armor, 6 morale. Not a great stat line for attacking at all. And they only move 4, which is their big downside. But they are very tanky, and in their role as a 5-point tanky unit to walk up, grab an objective, and hold on to it, they're extremely good for 5 points. So I would say, in their role as a tanky unit, I'm going to put them way up here. I would definitely rate them above the pikemen. And then the question is, are they better than Sentinels? No. I would say they're probably right in the middle here. Yeah, I would say that they're probably... I feel like they're more valuable in a Brotherhood army because I'm looking for that role. There's not a lot of units that can tank, that are extremely tanky. In fact, it's the exact opposite with the archers and the peasants being so squishy, that I would say I value them in their ability to bring a tanky unit. So I'm going to put them up here. Are they better than Cutthroats? Cutthroats just hit so damn hard. Would I rather have Cutthroats or Wardens? I think, honestly, I'd rate them higher than Cutthroats because, again, I would take my 6.7 points to my attacking pieces, and I would maybe want a more reliable piece to hold with. Now, again, the problem is if I was to take attacking pieces, they're really only 6-7 point units, not 8 point units in a 5-point mass 5-point activation build. I think I'd rate them above. You know, I would say if you took like one Warden, one Cutthroat, and then one Peasant, and then 6s and 7s, you might be okay. You have like a bit of everything, defensive and aggressive. But I do value the Sentinel even more still, so I'm going to keep that up here. All right. Next, we've got, let's just go down to the garbage pile. We've got Stonecrows, and I think Stonecrows are going to go into a terrible choice. Their special rule of giving a discount to Tyrion, you know, is not useful here at all, obviously, so we'll put them at the bottom. They just really bring nothing to the table that's worthwhile. Their healing is kind of meager. They kind of explode under panic. Their attack profile is kind of garbage. So I think you would never take Stonecrows in a Brotherhood army for that reason. You just don't really get maximum value for them. Similarly, I'm going to say Stormcrow Mercenaries either go here. They're definitely better than Stormcrows. Let's start with that. They either go here, and they might go here. The reason why they're not, I think, great in Brotherhood Without Banners is because their rule of giving a 1-point discount, you really can't juice that because Brotherhood already get that rule as well. So in this current edition of the game, you are getting 4 points of attachments, and Brotherhood get a 5th. So for Stormcrows to say you get a 6th, I think you're going to really struggle to fill out your attachment points. So their rule, again, is just not great. And then they have other rules too, motivate coin. They have a very mediocre stat line. Morale 6 nowadays really does help. I just don't see myself, though, taking them because you're not really using all the rules to full benefit. So I would leave them here as super niche. There is a world, I guess, where you take Ramsey Snow and other two pointers like Gendry, perhaps. So there's maybe a possibility where that comes into play. So I'll put them here and super niche. And then lastly, we got Karstark Spearmen, Crownman Trackers. Okay, let's start with the trackers. I absolutely love Crownman Trackers. I think that they are a really interesting dynamic unit that adds a really, really key rule being hidden traps. Hidden traps, even though they've nerfed it, is such a flexible rule. To lower your opponent's movement is such a big deal. The fact that they can be going through a bog and then you slow them down by one extra is such a game changer. And then extra hits never hurt either. If they have 3 ranks, dealing 3 hits for free, not a bad thing. And then the ability to throw out a vulnerable token is also good. Yes, this unit's very squishy. You have to accept that. But they also add a short range attack, which is really, really cool. I really like this unit a lot. And as a ranged unit, it actually, I think, takes precedence over a lot of units here. Range units, just tend to be better because you can take advantage of tactic zones earlier than other units can. So I actually think the Crownman Trackers, I got this unit so much, is going to leap way up here in front of Wardens, and the only question is, are they better than Sentinels? It's very close. It's very close. I think just because Brotherhood can lean into such heavy Sentinel builds, I'm going to rate them a little bit worse. But I really, really love what they bring to the table. More than any of these clunky walking around melee units can bring to the table. And lastly, we have Karstark Spearmen, who are kind of like a Warden unit. They're defensive. They don't actually have a better save, but they have, I can't remember what it's called now, but it's some rule where unyielding, I think it's called, perhaps? Let's double check. Stand your ground, where you don't get the charge bonus, essentially. They have a very, again, mediocre stat line, 7 attacks, first and second rank hitting on 4s. You're just there to take a charge. I think if I was going to take a charge, I'd rather take Wardens. So I'm going to rate them behind Wardens for sure. The question is, would I ever take them up before I take Cutthroats? No, I think if I want a tank unit, I'm going to take Wardens. So, man. As a result, they're kind of pushed out. They really are. They have Hold the Line. Hold the Line is a cool rule. Extra hits is always good. But if I wanted a tank, that's kind of their role, I would take Wardens first. So does that throw them into terrible choice because you've never taken them just outclassed? Maybe. Maybe. Do the hits matter enough? Does the speed matter enough? I don't think so. Yeah, so for me, because their role of a tank is just taken up by Wardens, and Wardens are just strictly better in my opinion. I know they're slower, but generally speaking, I just think they're better. I would put them down here. Are they better than Stone Crows? Yes, they are. I would never ever take Stone Crows. This is a possibility to take. Okay, so that is, again, my current ranking. Again, everything here is getting situational or worse because, in my opinion, you're taking 7-point units, 6-point units, 8-point units, and you're not really taking 5s. But, there may come a time when I experiment with 5-pointers, and I might try a Mass Sentinel build, for example, with Barrack Dondarrion, Gold Company Crossbows, and some Sentinels. So that's my list. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time for the next one. Bye-bye.